In the heart of an ancient remote wildlife sanctuary, thick trees stood like silent sentinels, their towering trunks twisting into the misty sky. The forest, lush and alive, was a place where few ventured, and fewer still stayed long enough to learn its secret rhythms. Hidden beneath layers of moss and soft earth, a labyrinth of winding trails and forgotten paths sprawled, waiting for the day when they would lead someone, or something, to their final destination. Through this enigmatic stretch of wilderness, a small terrier named Dash darted. His legs moved in swift, erratic bursts, the brush of his fur against the underbrush echoing a playful energy that the forest seemed to absorb. Dash, with his wiry coat and eager eyes, was a restless creature, always in motion, always seeking the next adventure. The dense forest was both a playground and a maze, where each tree offered new scents, and every rustle hinted at a potential chase. But today, Dash was no ordinary dog. He was on a mission. The trail had been set before him, one he could sense but could not fully understand. It was a mission that began when his owner, an elderly man with a slow gait and a deep affection for the animals in the sanctuary, had sent Dash out to find something. He hadn't given clear instructions, but Dash understood the importance of the task. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the thick undergrowth, and Dash's breathing became heavier as he pushed forward. His nose twitched in the air, following an odd scent, faint but persistent. It was unlike anything he had encountered before. It led him deeper into the forest, where the trees grew thicker and the shadows deeper. Suddenly, the underbrush ahead stirred. Dash froze, his small body tense as he peered into the shifting greenery. His tail twitched with both excitement and caution as he crouched low, trying to silence his breathing. Through the tangled vines and low-hanging branches, something large moved. It wasn't the familiar rustle of a rabbit or a deer, but something slower, heavier, more deliberate. With a soft huff, Dash crept forward, his body nearly brushing the forest floor. His muscles were taut, every fiber prepared for whatever lay ahead. And then, through the shadows, he saw it. A tortoise. Not just any tortoise, but an ancient one. Its shell, large and ridged, seemed to blend into the moss and leaves, almost indistinguishable from the forest floor itself. The tortoise moved with deliberate slowness, its small, worn legs shifting carefully as it inched along a barely visible trail that ran through the undergrowth. Its eyes were fixed ahead, unaware of Dash's presence. Dash's heart pounded. The tortoise was unlike any animal he had encountered before. Its quiet grace, its calm purpose. There was something about its slow movements that was hypnotic. And there was something more, something unsettling, about how it seemed to blend with the earth, almost as if it belonged to the forest in a way Dash could never understand. The terrier's instinct told him to chase, to pounce, to assert his dominance, but as he watched, a strange wave of caution washed over him. He had never seen an animal quite like this. There was an ancient power in the tortoise's presence, something he couldn't quite put into words. He followed it step by step, his tiny paws padding silently behind the creature. Time seemed to stretch as the tortoise moved forward, unfazed by the dog's watchful eyes. The trail twisted deeper into the sanctuary, leading them both into a part of the forest Dash had never explored, a part where the air grew cooler and the sounds of the world seemed to dampen, as though the very atmosphere had been thickened by something otherworldly. The further they went, the stranger the forest became. The trees were older here, their trunks gnarled and twisted, their canopies so thick that no sunlight broke through. The silence was palpable, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves and the soft, steady movement of the tortoise ahead. It was as though the forest had become a living thing, its own heartbeat thudding low beneath the earth. And Dash heard it. A distant, low growl. It was faint, but unmistakable. A growl that seemed to resonate from somewhere deep within the forest. A warning. Dash's ears perked up, and his body stiffened. The tortoise continued its path, oblivious to the sound. Another growl, closer this time. Dash hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to retreat, but something about the tortoise's calm demeanor held him in place. The sound of the growl grew louder, and then came a snapping of twigs, a violent, bone-rattling crash through the underbrush. Dash's muscles tensed, and he instinctively moved to protect the tortoise, but before he could act, a massive shadow loomed from the trees. It was a wild boar, its tusks gleaming in the dim light, its eyes wild and filled with an animalistic fury. It charged, its hoofs pounding the earth, a blur of motion that sent shockwaves through the... Dash lunged toward the tortoise, ready to warn it, but the tortoise did something unexpected. Without haste, without fear, it tucked its head into its shell and remained motionless. For a moment, Dash stood frozen, unsure what to do. The boar was almost upon them. Its snout was wide and hungry, its gaze fixed on the tortoise. Dash barked furiously, darting back and forth in front of the boar, but the creature ignored him, intent on its target. Then something extraordinary happened. The tortoise, still shielded in its hard, weathered shell, began to move. Slowly, as if sensing the danger, it slid forward, unhurried, and positioned itself directly in the boar's path. The boar skidded to a halt. It sniffed the air, confused, its eyes darting between Dash and the unyielding shell of the tortoise. For a long moment, there was nothing but tension, the wild energy of the moment suspended in the air like a charged wire. Then, with an unexpected grace, the boar turned and lumbered away, disappearing back into the depths of the forest. Dash stood still, panting heavily, his heart racing. He looked down at the tortoise, who slowly emerged from its shell as calm as ever. The creature had faced the wild boar with a wisdom Dash could not understand. It hadn't fled, nor had it fought back. It had simply existed in the face of danger, its presence too solid to be intimidated by the chaos of the forest. Dash, still panting, sat down beside the tortoise. He realized in that moment that there was more to this world than speed, than chasing. There was a deep strength in stillness, a quiet power that only time and experience could impart. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the forest floor. Dash, no longer filled with the frantic energy that had once driven him, stayed close to the tortoise, following its slow but steady path back toward the sanctuary. And as the evening sky turned deep purple and the stars began to emerge, Dash realized that this unexpected bond, the one between the quick and the slow, the small and the large, was something that would forever change the way he moved through the world. As the evening deepened, the forest around them seemed to change. The once dominant hues of green and gold slowly gave way to darker shades, with the looming trees becoming silhouetted against the fading light. The stillness of the night pressed in, the world settling into a quiet rhythm. The only sound was the rustle of the leaves in the gentle wind, the soft padding of Dash's paws on the forest floor, and the steady, deliberate movements of the tortoise as it slowly made its way back through the woods. Despite the overwhelming calm, Dash remained alert. His mind raced, still caught in the echoes of the earlier encounter with the boar. His small, anxious body had felt powerless in the face of that wild creature's power, but now, beside the tortoise, he felt something new, a quiet strength, a sense of reassurance. The tortoise had not panicked, it had not run, it had simply been. Dash found himself drawn to its unshakable calm, a feeling that was slowly becoming familiar. As they moved along, Dash glanced around at the shadowed landscape. The growls of the boar had long since faded into the distance, but Dash still couldn't shake the tension in the air. The forest was large and mysterious, full of hidden threats that only creatures like the tortoise seemed to understand. Dash knew his instincts told him to avoid danger, to stay quick and nimble, but the tortoise showed him a different way, a way of standing firm, of enduring whatever came with patience and resilience. They came to a small clearing, where a shallow stream meandered lazily through the undergrowth. The stream's waters glittered with the first stars, creating a shimmering trail across the otherwise darkened forest floor. The tortoise paused at the water's edge, its face tilted up toward the sky, as if sensing the same quiet wonder that filled Dash's heart. For a moment there was no movement in the clearing, no sound except the soft trickle of water and the rustling of the wind. Dash's tail swayed slowly behind him, almost in sync with the breeze. It was as though the forest itself was holding its breath. Then Dash heard it. The distant snap of a twig. The unmistakable sound of something moving stealthily through the woods. His fur prickled and his muscles tensed. He turned toward the sound, his instincts on high alert. The tortoise, still as ever, didn't react. Suddenly the noise became clearer. There was something large moving through the undergrowth, not the deliberate, slow pace of the tortoise, but something more erratic, more anxious. Dash's heart began to race again, and he instinctively stepped between the tortoise and the sound. His small frame, though not much of a shield, was ready to protect his companion. The rustling grew louder, closer. But this time, instead of the same ominous growl of the boar, Dash picked up a faint, high-pitched squeal. Something smaller. Something faster. Then, through the shadows of the trees, a movement caught Dash's sharp eyes. A young fawn, thin and fragile, emerged from the brush. Its wide eyes were filled with fear, its legs unsteady as it stumbled through the clearing. Dash's stance relaxed slightly, but he remained watchful. The fawn was in no position to fight, nor could it flee quickly in such an unfamiliar place. Dash's eyes flicked to the tortoise. It hadn't moved. It simply watched, unmoved by the fawn's nervous energy. In that moment, Dash realized something new. The tortoise didn't just possess a quiet strength. It had an understanding of the world that transcended fear. The tortoise wasn't intimidated by the fawn, nor was it overwhelmed by the chaos of the forest. It simply knew that everything had its time, its place. The fawn, sensing no immediate danger, continued to graze tentatively by the stream. Dash's body relaxed further and he crouched low, observing. The fawn seemed unaware of Dash's presence entirely, its focus on the soft grass near the water's edge. Dash, understanding the fawn's vulnerability, kept his distance, not wanting to disturb it. The tortoise, still at the edge of the stream, slowly shifted its weight and began to move again, its steady pace undeterred by the presence of the fawn. Dash, feeling something stir deep inside him, decided to follow its lead. He took a few cautious steps toward the tortoise, but before he could reach it, a second noise split the air, this one much closer. A quick, sharp rustle. Dash froze in place, his eyes searching the trees. A new scent filled the air, stronger than the others. It was heavier, more aggressive. And then, the unmistakable shape of another animal emerged from the dark foliage. It was larger than the fawn, and its eyes glinted with a dangerous hunger. A coyote. Dash's heart pounded in his chest as he immediately went into defensive mode. His instincts screamed for him to run, but he couldn't leave the tortoise. The coyote's eyes locked on the fawn with laser focus, and Dash's body vibrated with the tension of the moment. The tortoise, unfazed by the impending danger, continued its slow movement toward the stream, completely unaware of the predator's presence. Dash, once again torn between protecting his new friend and facing down the threat before them, took a deep breath. He had learned something from the tortoise's calmness, something that was becoming a part of him. Without thinking, Dash sprang forward, barking wildly. The coyote paused for just a fraction of a second, its focus momentarily shifting from the fawn to Dash. The young dog's ferocity seemed to take the predator by surprise. It hesitated, just long enough for the fawn to bolt away into the deeper shadows of the forest. Dash didn't stop. He barked again, louder now, until the coyote, with a final disdainful glance, turned and slinked back into the forest. The danger had passed. Dash, panting and exhilarated, returned to the tortoise, who still moved at the same measured pace. The fawn had vanished into the night, its silhouette disappearing into the distant trees. The forest seemed to exhale a collective breath, the tension slowly draining from the air. As Dash stood beside the tortoise, a strange quiet settled around them. The terrier was still, as if he had found the center of something deeper than instinct. The tortoise, slow and patient, had faced down the world without once flinching. And now, Dash understood, strength was not always in speed or the ability to fight. Sometimes, strength came from enduring, from facing the world with quiet grace. With the moon rising high above the sanctuary, Dash followed the tortoise once more, walking beside it, his pace slower now. He had learned much in the last few hours, not only about the forest and its dangers, but about his place within it. The tortoise moved on, its shell a steady and unyielding reminder that there was power in patience. And Dash, at last, was learning that the forest had its own way, its own time, a time when even the smallest, most restless of creatures could find their place in the great unfolding of the world around them. As the night deepened, the moon hung like a silent sentinel in the sky, casting its pale light across the forest. The wind had calmed, and the earlier tension in the air seemed to have lifted, but an underlying stillness persisted. The forest, though teeming with life, felt almost as if it were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. For Dash and the tortoise, the world around them had become a place of quiet awareness. They continued their slow journey along the stream, Dash now more attuned to the subtle sounds and movements of the wilderness. His earlier panic had subsided, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of tranquility. His small frame padded softly beside the tortoise, who moved with unwavering certainty, as if each step was part of a much larger rhythm, one that Dash was only beginning to understand. Suddenly, a rustle in the bushes caught Dash's attention. His ears perked up and his body tensed in instinctual readiness. He was still wary, even after his encounter with the coyote. His mind raced through the possible dangers in the forest. A bird? Another predator? Or perhaps a more surprising... The tortoise, ever calm, didn't flinch. It continued its slow, deliberate pace, unaffected by the sounds of the woods. Dash glanced up at his companion, marveling at the tortoise's implacable nature. How did it remain so unperturbed by the constant movement and danger around them? Dash, in his youth and impulsiveness, was often guided by fear, by the desire to protect, to act quickly. But the tortoise seemed to move through the world with a quiet confidence that spoke of a deeper understanding. The rustling intensified, and Dash's instincts told him it was time to investigate. He darted ahead, his small form weaving through the undergrowth. As he approached the noise, he paused, his sharp eyes scanning the dark forest for any sign of what lay ahead. Then, from behind a thick bush, a figure emerged. At first, Dash thought it was another animal, but as it came closer, he realized it was something entirely unexpected. A human. The man was hunched, his clothing torn and dirty, his eyes wide and darting as if he were searching for something, or someone. Dash stood frozen, unsure whether to bark or retreat. The man's eyes met Dash's, and for a long moment neither moved. The air between them was thick with uncertainty. The tortoise, noticing the shift in the atmosphere, paused just behind Dash, its gaze fixed on the man. There was no alarm in the tortoise's eyes, no sign of distress. Instead, it seemed to regard the figure with a quiet curiosity, as though the man were simply another element in the forest's vast, interconnected web.